Hi, Katrina here with Devil Doll Custom Creations. For this, I want to give a big shout out to Jessica Flynn at Flynn Sisters Boutique on YouTube. She created this tracksuit design. Please go check her out. I do mine slightly different and call it a V-split, but it's the same thing. So first, you're going to try to find your bottom circumference. You're just going to draw it on a piece of paper and then cut it out. This is going to help you line up your V's on top to bottom. Since I do a bunch of these, I label mine and keep them for later. So you just fold it in half. That's going to give you the exact middle of your tumbler. You're going to take a pencil and just do a few little marks on the bottom of your tumbler. You can make them darker if you need to. And also bring it up the tumbler just slightly so you can measure it to get the top line. Jessica did this on a lined ruler paper. Make your marks out onto the paper so it's easier to see with your ruler. You're going to then line up your ruler. I line it up to the line and it's level. I just go straight up the tumbler to get a straight line. Then erase any pencil marks you're not going to need. I do mine 3/4 of an inch. Jessica does hers 1 inch. It is a preference. You choose. They're both painter's tape. They're just different widths. So first you're going to start at your bottom line and bring your tape up to your top line. I try to start my tape out with a straight line. It just seems to be easier. You don't have to do this. When you start, you're going to want to start at a point from the bottom and bring it up. You want to leave a gap at the top and bottom so your vinyl lines will be present on the tumbler and not underneath. This is going to take a little maneuvering, a little bringing it up and down until you get it to your liking. Believe me, I've done a lot of these and I still struggle some days. Once you are done adjusting and you find a point that you like, you are going to then trim off the extra with a sharp craft knife. Make sure your inside V to your bottom V is even. If it's slightly off, you will see that later. And then you're just going to repeat the process for your top V until you get it perfect. And then you're going to want to wrap or cover the part that we're not spray painting. So what I tend to do is I take cling wrap and I kind of just fold it back over and tape it over my line. So it's going to be completely covering where I'm putting my pages, but the bottom section where I'm glittering is where I'm going to spray paint an ombre of colors. You want to make sure it's adhered to the tumbler so you don't have any bleed underneath your tape. I am sorry, I did not tape the spray painting part, but you just spray paint an ombre, whatever color, house colors you're wanting. Now I am going to use epoxy to glitter. I have warmed my tumbler up with a heat gun slightly, so my epoxy goes on nice and thin. If you have too thick of a coat, your glitter kind of soaks up the epoxy and can give it a different look. Instead of just being the glue to the tumbler, it won't look as nice. You're just going to keep rubbing your hands so you don't have any streaks in your epoxy. They will show under your glitter. And if your epoxy is how you like it, now it's time to glitter. This is Peachy Olive Glitter St. Jude. So what I do is I usually do the bottoms completely, and then I bring it up onto the tumbler. Before I ever try to ombre anything, I want to get that bottom color completely saturated before I move on to my chunkies. So this is going to be a mix-up of holographic dots from Mr. Noah's glitter to Hamilton. So then I'm just going to go from the top V and slightly drop a few down onto that top epoxy. I'm not going to cover it completely. I'm just adding a few, and then I'll fill in the gaps with different sizes of block glitter here. Next is Blackout Chunky from Bulk Glitters. So it's going to kind of fill in those gaps between the dot chunky glitter where the epoxy is still open. Then I'm going to change the angle of my tumbler at an angle. Then you're going to kind of tap your glitters to have it kind of cascade down onto the bottom color. This is why I saturate my bottom color fully, so you don't get any blacks or the top color sticking to any epoxy on the bottom color. Now I'm going to add my fine black just to make sure everything is filled in on that top section. Take your time with this part. It's easier to go slow from the beginning than try to remove too much later. Once you have it how you like it, then I take some more of my bottom color and just kind of sprinkle it where those two colors meet to give it a better ombre. If you have your tumbler at an angle when you do this, it's going to cascade into the black or into the top color better. And you're just going to keep going back and forth until you get the look you're going for. Then once you're satisfied with how it looks, you're just going to remove your cling wrap or saran wrap if you still have it on, the tape around your edges. Once you have your tape off, you're going to take a small piece of wax paper and tap down your glitter. This is just helping the chunky glitter lay flat. And look out for any strays. I've sealed this with clear coat, and then I'm going to add quick coat. I have taped just outside my glitter line. This is quick coat with a gloved finger. I kind of just dab onto my chunkies first on the top V. And then once I'm happy with that, if I don't have any on my finger or I wipe it off, I move on to the next color. I try to keep my colors separate until I know they're not going to stray into each other too much. Quick coat is a really great sealant, so it's just sealing in your glitters. So when you epoxy, they're not going to move too much. I know you can't see this, but don't forget to get your bottoms really well also, and around the edge where epoxy pulls up. I am so sorry, I forgot to record the epoxy step with the yellow and black. Luckily, I have a whole order of every house, so they're all the exact same thing, it's just different colors. And now I'm moving on to my epoxy step. I leave my turner off at this time while I get that V. Once I have it to my liking, I turn my turner on and move on to the bottom color. Since we used quick coat, the glitter is pretty sealed in there. You're not going to have a whole lot of movement from your glitters. But if you do, just take a baby wipe, wipe your hand off before you move on to the next color. I forgot to say, this is Counterculture's DIY Fast Set Epoxy. I use about 15 milliliters total. Your first coat of epoxy over raw glitter is always going to be a thicker coat. Since this is fast set and not a normal epoxy, you have to move fairly quick. So once I have my tumbler completely coated, I then hit it with my heat gun immediately just to get the epoxy rolling slightly. If I have any spillover onto my tape, I take a baby wipe and I wipe it up before I remove my tape and hit it with my torch very fast to pop any micro bubbles. Remove your tape and let it turn for the time it needs to cure before moving on to the next step. And again, I am sorry, I switched to another house cup in that same order. It's the same thing. We are going to now do the divided line. Your other glitter is completely cured. You're just going to want to touch up if you've had any marks or the tape has pulled up any of your spray paint. I just take acrylic paint of that color and slightly cover any imperfections you have. Because the glitter is more of an opal, you will see if you leave a black mark underneath and not have it solid white. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you're going to want it the same color. Once the acrylic paint is dry, you're then going to Mod Podge and glitter that divided line. I prefer a angled brush. This is a 1/2 inch. You want to make sure your tape is completely adhered to the tumbler before you start Mod Podging. Then you're just going to brush on your glue of choice. Doesn't have to be Mod Podge. Make sure you're trying not to get too many streaks. I tend to kind of glob it on and then take my angle part and bump it up against the cured epoxy glitter and then pull it towards the tape. Once I have that to my liking, then I kind of soften it up. Make sure you get your points. Once you have your edges done, you're going to take your brush and just kind of run it over and make sure you don't have any globs, because your glitter will look different if it's globbed up in certain places. If you are using Mod Podge, remember it dries quickly, so you kind of need to do this fairly quick. If you have any spillover, just take your finger or baby wipe and wipe it up, and then glitter. Knock off your extra, and if you need to do another pass of glitter around to make sure your edges are good, do that now, or you can do a whole nother coat of Mod Podge once this dries and another layer of glitter if you didn't get full coverage this time. I then grab a brush and kind of brush off the extra that is on my epoxy part of my tumbler, so I'm not wasting any of my glitter. And then you're going to do a quick look around to make sure if you need to do a second coat or not. If you're happy with it, remove your tape. And then once your Mod Podge is dry, you're going to then tape right on the outside edge again before you move on to seal it. I sealed it with 1 coat of clear sealant before I moved on to quick coat. So you're just going to add it exactly how you did the other one. You're just trying to seal in that glitter, right? Make sure you don't have any on your hand before you move to the rest of the tumbler. I do the entire tumbler. It just makes a glass-like finish. And then you're going to move into the epoxy step. This is Counterculture's DIY Fast Set again. You're going to want to pay attention to your divided line, the raw glitter you just did. Make sure you get between the tape and the glitter line to seal that in fully. I kind of do a quick glance at my hand before I move on to the rest of my tumbler to make sure I don't have any stray glitters on my hand from that divided line that would move to other parts of my tumbler. You're just going to want to make sure every part of your tumbler has epoxy on it. Since this is fast set, I do have to move fairly quickly. So once I have my tumbler completely coated, I then hit it with the heat gun for a couple rotations. Then hit it with my torch to pop any micro bubbles that might appear. You're going to want to wipe up the overflow of epoxy over your tape before you remove your tape. So what I do is I just grab a baby wipe and I slowly go along my tape line. Then I remove my tape. You can use a baby wipe to wipe up any extra epoxy after you've taken your tape off as well. And then you're going to let your tumbler turn until your epoxy is cured before you move on to the next step, which is the burned pages section of this tutorial. Please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell notification so you get notified every time I post a tutorial, including part 2 of this tutorial, which is the burned pages section, plus the metallic vinyl divided lines and our final coats of epoxy. In the description below, I will write all of the glitter colors I used for all the different house cups you've seen during these tutorials. And don't forget to join my Tumblr group at facebook.com/DevilDollCommunity.